Hello. Today I'd like to talk about some thoughts that have been just kind of swirling in my mind for, well, really the last couple months. And there's three things that I think are all interrelated, and I'm going to just talk about each one and then see if I can make sense of this stuff in my mind. Um, so this might be a little bit of a ramble, but um, I'm going to do it anyways. The three things I wanted to talk about are a broken bridge. Now, I would say a worn out bridge, broken ribs, and uh, a burnt mountainside. Those are the three things. So, a worn out bridge, broken ribs, and a burnt mountainside. And the reason why I want to talk about these three things is because I think it kind of shows what our living situation is like. But it's at the edges of, I think, our consciousness as a, it's at the edges of our consciousness as a civilization. So I don't think it registers with most people. Also, it goes against the dominant narrative in this culture, which is um, a narrative of unending progress, unlimited resources, uh, continuous improvement, exponential growth, forever. So that's why I want to talk about this. So let's see which one to start with first. I think I'm going to save the broken ribs one for last. We'll talk about the Wornout Bridge. There is a bridge that is in Washington State, where I live, over the Carbon River. It is over 100 years old. I think it was built in. Excuse me. I got some allergies. There's a lot of pollen in the air. Lots of plants are very happy to be alive, and my car is coated in pollen. Okay, so going back to the Wornout Bridge. There is a bridge in this state, Washington, over the Carbon River that was built 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, 1921, I believe. It spans a very deep and steep valley into a river. And it provides the only public access to one of three entrances to Mount Rainier National Park. So Mount Rainier National Park is a national park around, I think, the tallest volcano in the United States. It's 14,600 feet tall, which, well, in the mainland, I think the Denali in Alaska is taller. I don't know if Denali is a volcano. I think it is, but I'm not sure. But Mount Rainier is a volcano, and it's very tall, and there's a beautiful national park around it. And then there's three ways to get into the park, pretty much at thirds of a circle. So here's a circle. Over here is the Carbon River entrance, and then over here is the Sunrise entrance, and then down at the bottom is the Paradise entrance. Well, this year I got the lottery to get backcountry campsites in Mount Rainier National Park, and there's a trail that goes around it called the Wonderland Trail. That's 90 some miles long. Uh, Unfortunately, my lottery date, so they give you a date, was at the end of the lottery period. Uh, so all the campsites along the Wonderland Trail were taken. So Whiskey Ryan and I got um, campsites along the eastern edge of the eastern edge of the park. But I was trying to figure out how to do this. But in the midst of planning this out, because I was thinking, well, I would like to do the Wonderland Trail, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. But in the midst of planning this, like literally the day that I was going to submit my plan and see if there were availabilities on the trail, there was a notice sent out that I think it's the Fairfax Bridge over Carbon River is closed to all traffic, including foot traffic. And that's the only way, the road to get into one of the three entrances. So if you were to do a hike around the mountain, you'd have to go all the way around, because now this entrance on the northwest side is closed because the bridge is closed. And the bridge isn't closed like right at the entrance, it's closed like farther up, and there's no other way around except through a private land, but it's not available to public. It's only available to search and rescue, emergency personnel, and the person who owns that private property. So that bridge closed, and the reason why it closed is because it's over 100 years old, and the steel supports have started to bow and bend and give way. And so it's not even safe for people to walk across because it could give out. Well, it's closed indefinitely. There is no money to rebuild this bridge. The state said there is no money to rebuild this bridge. Now, there was a similar situation that happened in one of the other national parks in the state. This is the Olympic National Park. There's a road that goes into Olympic National Park to the Hoh Rainforest, one of the wettest places on earth. It's a temperate rainforest. It is really pretty. My wife and Doobie. Doobie is 8 years old now. She had her birthday yesterday, and she had a great birthday. I think we tried to have her have a good birthday. We gave her some of her favorite foods. She loves sweet potatoes, and she loves steak. I hardly ever eat steak. Same thing with my wife, but we got some just for her birthday. That's like our tradition. She eats mostly her kibble and whatever, some foods that are okay for her to eat that we eat. But on her birthdays, we usually give her a little bit of steak and some sweet potato. And she ate all of it, and she looked really happy. And we went for a really long walk, and she sniffed all these things. I think she had a good day. Well, Doobie and I and my wife, we camped over there in Hoh Rainforest. And it was beautiful. But there was one road in, and that road washed out over the winter. But not completely. It had only washed out the shoulder. One of the rivers had come too close and eroded away the support for the 2-lane road. So just the shoulder was washed out, and so they had to close the road. This was like in January. But there was no funds to there were no federal funds to repair the road. So they just kept it closed, but over time, the damage went from the shoulder to now taking up the whole one lane is gone. It's into the river. And then there's still no plan to fix the road. And so it ended up taking out the whole road, both lanes. Now, the interesting thing about that to me is that there's always construction, like in the city. Like in the city, it seems like highways are always snarled with traffic because there's some construction where they're trying to widen it or improve a bridge or something like that. This is a tiny road in the backcountry, and they couldn't fix it in time to prevent it from being washed out completely. If you had the funds and you started repairing it right away, it would have been a lot cheaper to just repair the washed out shoulder relative to repairing a whole road that's completely washed out, swept into the river. So like the longer you wait, the more expensive it is to repair. Well, there were no federal funds to repair this road, and so it was thought that there's going to be no access to that area, possibly this summer, unless someone pays for it, the repair. Well, despite it being on federal land, Washington State agreed to pay $600,000 to repair the road. So they think that it'll be open for summertime. So that's good. This road, it's going to a beautiful place. It'll be open. It'll be open for people who want to enjoy the beauty of the Olympic National Park and the Hoh National Rainforest. But a bridge is different. A bridge is way more expensive than just a road. A bridge is spanning a very steep, rugged area with lots of steel, lots of metal, lots of concrete, more complicated engineering. Well, it doesn't look like there's going to be any money to repair that. Now they're talking about, well, what do we do? Do we just leave it? Leave that area just closed off forever to traffic, public traffic? Or do we make a long-term plan to save some money to rebuild the bridge? Well, right now it looks like there's just no plan to rebuild the bridge. So it's interesting to me that there's this bridge that people have used for over 100 years, and now we're just going to let it go and let access to that part of the land go. The original plan that Whiskey Rye and I had was to start at Sunrise, which was on the northeast side, and then hike the Wonderland Trail to the Carbon River exit, and then go do a section hike and then end there. But we can't because that bridge is closed. Now, some people will say, "Oh, big deal, this is a backcountry bridge. It's only for hikers and backpackers. Maybe a few people that live down that road. We should use our money for other things." Yeah, I mean, I can see that point of view. But the reason why I bring it up is that it's an example of infrastructure in our civilization breaking down and needing to be replaced, but there's not money to replace it. The more things we develop and build, the more maintenance is required to go back and revise it or improve it or repair it. I've talked about fossil fuels and how fossil fuel extraction is getting more energy intensive because we've already extracted the easily accessible fossil fuels. So now we have to go after the deeper, more difficult to access fossil fuels, which requires more energy, which means that the energy we extract out of the ground, a smaller fraction of that can be used to do things, because a bigger fraction goes back into getting more of the fossil fuel out of the ground. But there's another aspect to a civilization that keeps growing, and that is that when you grow and you develop and you build, more of the energy has to go to maintaining and repairing and rebuilding the same thing. So not only from the energy extraction standpoint, but from the maintaining standpoint, the more we grow and build, the more energy is required just to keep what we have. But what I see with this bridge going out, and this road that took too long to repair, now it's very expensive to repair, is that I think we're coming to this kind of limit of what we've built so far is so expensive to and energy intensive to maintain that we're having to let some of it go. And that goes against the dominant narrative that there's unending progress and improvement and growth, unending growth in our civilization. That's not what I'm seeing with these two examples. And that's why I want to talk about it. Well, that's the broken or the worn out bridge. Let's see. The second one was a burnt mountainside. Now, there is a backpacking trip that I did last year, which is one of the most beautiful trips that I've done along the Lake Chelan lakeshore. It's called the Lakeshore Trail of Lake Chelan. And it's in this really rugged, remote lake that's very long and very deep. I think it's the second or third deepest lake in the United States. Chelan is Native American for deep water. That is the Ceylon. I think what it means in Native American language for the tribe that lives in that area, is deep water, because it's very deep. It's beautiful, deep blue water, steep mountain valleys around it. It's like carved out by glaciers, so it's like it looks like a fjord, but doesn't connect to the ocean. It's just a lake. Well, I did that last year, and last year I saw that there were a lot of burnt trees from a fire like 2 decades ago, and I saw all this life just making it in the area. Beautiful flowers and butterflies and shrubs, and some of the older trees had survived the fire from 2 decades ago, and it was really cool. Well, last year, the summer was really hot and dry, and a fire started there called the Pioneer Fire, and it wiped out the forest in that area, and going into Stehekin, which is a town at the very end of the lake that you can only access by boat. Well, they were able to protect a lot of Stehekin, but the fire went pretty much all around it. Well, I was thinking about going back there and backpacking again, and then seeing what it looks like after a recent fire. Because last time I went, I saw what it looked like after a fire 2 decades ago. So I was looking into it, and the two main campsites along that trail. So it's a 17-mile trail, and I've walked. I think the most I've walked in a day is like 23 miles, maybe. No. The most I've walked in a day is 40 miles because I did that one time, and that was awful. I wouldn't recommend walking 40 miles in a day. But 17 miles, it's tough, and so I would want to stay overnight somewhere at least. But the two main campgrounds that are that are on this trail, they're closed because the fire creates a hazard that I'll explain. It's not that the campground burnt down. Well, it did, but that's not why it's dangerous to stay there. It's dangerous to stay there because the two campgrounds, the main campgrounds, they're at the alluvial bed, or the mouth of a creek. Both of them, two different creeks, and when the forest burns down upstream, there can be trees that fell down, dead trees, and they create like a log dam or a log jam. And because the trees are not alive anymore, and a lot of them are dead, and they fell down, and a lot of the brush, the shrubs, they burnt too. There's not much to hold the soil and the water. So if it rains a lot uphill in the mountains, you can get a flash flood just roaring down the mountain. And if there was like a log jam or damming up a bunch of water, and then it gives way, then you can have a bunch of water flash flood down the creek path, and because the main campgrounds are at the mouth of these creeks, mainly for a water supply. Anyone who's camping there could die from a torrent of rocks and water and dead trees just flowing down the mountainside in the creek valley. So I can't stay at the two main campgrounds. Now, there are some very small, much smaller campgrounds that are dispersed kind of along the trail, but they have fewer areas for people to camp, and they're not as developed as the other campsites. But I'm thinking about going still, and then just trying to camp at one of the other places. I'm curious to see what the forest looks like. Curious to see if there's morel mushrooms, because morel mushrooms, they're interesting. They live in the trees, but when a tree gets burnt, the morel mushroom pops up on the ground next to the burnt tree. Somehow the fire activates the fungus to release its fruiting body, which is the mushroom. And I don't think I've ever tasted morel mushrooms, but I'm kind of curious because I heard that they're really yummy. That's kind of cool. That there's something that's beautiful that happens through the destruction of a forest fire. A morel comes up. That's kind of cool. So I'm curious to see that. But that kind of goes to the theme of this talk, is that there is some limits that we're coming up against in our growth. Let's just say, which it's not true, but let's just say we did have unlimited energy sources, which we have the sun, but our civilization, which is effectively limitless, because by the time it becomes a red giant and swallows up the earth, I mean, we'll be long gone. But so it's effectively limitless, but our civilization is so hungry for energy. It's using way more energy than just what we can harness from the sun at this point. So let's just say we had all the energy we could possibly desire. Let's just say someone figured out how to do a fusion reactor, and we had effectively limitless energy, which we don't. And there is no end in sight for figuring out how to do a fusion reactor that is self-sustaining and generative of energy. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as 0-point energy. People talk about that with UFOs and all this stuff, UAPs, but I don't know, maybe it does exist and I just don't know about it and no one else knows about it, but effectively it doesn't exist because we're not using it. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories that I see in the comments of my own videos saying that, oh, well, it's just, we actually have all this energy, but it's just the people who are powerful want to control us, and so they create this austerity that is manufactured, and that's a conspiracy theory, and that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is that we have this idea of exponential growth that is unending in our civilization, and we're running up against the limits of a finite world. That's not a conspiracy. That is reality. The other idea is a conspiracy. I mean, that's just someone made up this idea because it sounds good and it makes you're like, oh yeah, there's some bad people out there, and it doesn't have to be this way. It makes it easier to stomach what we're all experiencing. And I think conspiracy theories do that. They make things easier to stomach because you got a boogeyman, and it deflects the responsibility of the situation from ourselves to some other. Your conspiracy theories, if you have some, are not welcome in the comments of this channel, because I don't think it's helpful to look at the reality of a situation and accept what's going on. Well, let's just say we did, though, have infinite energy. Well, our civilization would still run into limits to growth because we would heat up the environment, heat up the atmosphere, just from all the energy that's being used. Because whenever you use energy, some of it's converted into heat. Some of it's converted into CO2, which traps heat from the sun in our atmosphere. And so even if we had unlimited energy, we would kill ourselves with heat death. Well, what we're seeing now is that things heat up. The forests are burning. This is a beautiful lake. I want to go there, but a little concerned that it might be a little dangerous because the trees and shrubs have died. They're holding the rocks together. There could be landslides, and I already highlighted the dangers of the campgrounds. You can't stay there; they're closed because for overnight use. Because if you're sleeping, you may not hear this flash flood of rocks and water and trees coming down the mountain. Um, that story also goes against the dominant narrative. The dominant narrative is that we can fix all our problems with technology. There's some way we can tech our way out of this. Um, we can do carbon capture uh, by burning more energy to capture CO2. Well, the only carbon capture projects that have captured some CO2 has been like, I think one in like CO2 in Iceland using geothermal energy from the volcanoes there, and the amount of CO2 they captured in these giant machines is minuscule compared to the amount of CO2 that's released by our burning of fossil fuels. Like minuscule. There's no way that could happen. Planting trees is good, but we're cutting down forests, and forests are burning from getting parched and just it's too hot. They're at a much faster rate than we're planting trees. So, yeah, it's a good idea, and we should still do that, but it's not going to stop what's happening. And then there's some pretty wacky ideas like geoengineering, where you spray sulfate particles into the upper atmosphere. Because there's a couple times, I think it was Mount Pinatubo exploded one time in I think the 90s, and then it sent up a bunch of gas up into the upper atmosphere, and it cooled the earth for a while. And that gave scientists an idea that what if we flew an airplane, or many airplanes, way up high into the atmosphere and sprayed these sulfide particles to create a dimming around of the Earth's surface, because the particles up in the upper atmosphere will block some of the sunlight from getting in. That is crazy talk for a couple of reasons. The Earth is so complex that the idea that you can control it easily by just flying an airplane up there and putting some particles up there, and you can predict exactly what's going to happen, where and when, all around the world is insane. Also, let's just say you were successful in doing that, and you were able to cool the earth down to pre-industrial temperatures, baseline. Well, you'd have to constantly be flying airplanes up into the upper atmosphere to spray these particles. And the moment you stop, the temperatures are going to just come roaring back like whiplash. And so think about all the energy that's required to fly these airplanes constantly. And this is also where some people come up with conspiracy theories about chemtrails. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about geoengineering. I'm not talking about chemtrails. Then there's other conspiracy theories. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about the reality of what we're dealing with. I mean, there are aerosols that are released into the atmosphere right now, some from airplanes. There were a lot coming from ships traveling the ocean, the big cargo container ships. They were using a fuel that had a lot of sulfur in it. And I think it was like 3 years ago, 2020, no, 4 years ago, I think it was 2021, um, there was a policy that was enacted that um, said that the ships couldn't use this type of fuel anymore. They had to use something that was cleaner burning. And in the 3 years after that, the temperatures in the Earth's atmosphere and the sea temperatures have jumped up really quickly. And that's because the aerosol masking from the sulfate from these shipping fuels went down. And they were effectively geoengineering our environment from the ships going across the ocean, carrying all the stuff that people are buying. Cars, food, plastic stuff, electronic devices, all these things, all these things were traveling the oceans and creating this sulfates aerosol. And then when they changed the fuel requirements for the ships, that went away, and that was like a shield reflecting light from the sun. And now that went away. Now light just came in, and then the Earth has heated up a lot in the last 4 years. So it removed an aerosol masking, partially. Well, that gives us a glimpse of what would happen if we were purposely, intentionally geoengineering the atmosphere by flying airplanes constantly, and we ran out of money to do it, ran out of fuel to do it, ran out of energy to do it. Then, boom, temperature skyrockets much higher than it did with the shipping fuel thing. We'd be in a world of hurt. It's kind of like the infrastructure problem. Like the more you build the infrastructure, the more energy and money you have to pour into maintaining it. Well, we're kind of running up against limits with our environment. Well, those are two pretty heavy topics. The third topic is the broken ribs. I mentioned in the last video that I was going to talk about breaking ribs. And it ties into this, but in more of a social way. And that'll be the end of the talk. This is a long talk already. So I like hiking a lot, and sometimes I trail run, but trail running is pretty treacherous, especially on very rocky, steep trails. One of the times I was running down a mountain, and it was very rocky, and there were some hikers, and I was trying to dodge the hikers, but there was three of them, three young men, and two of them went to one side and one went to the other side, which made it a little tricky to navigate with a bunch of rocks on the trail. And I was kind of jogging past the first two, and then I tried to dodge the third one, and I caught my toe on a rock, and it just went over the edge and fell down a steep embankment about maybe 15, 20 feet. Like I somersaulted, and bam, bam, and I cracked my, I either cracked one rib in multiple places, or I cracked multiple ribs, possibly in multiple places. Hurt a lot. But when I came home, I was able to drive home. I had to decide whether to go to the hospital, and with my medical background, and I did neurosurgery, and part of that was doing trauma neurosurgery. I worked with a lot of trauma teams, and I learned from watching my trauma surgeon colleagues, what do you do when someone breaks their ribs? Well, if they don't have any bleeding in their chest or into their lung cavity, or a punctured lung with a collapsed lung, then you just leave the rib fractures alone, unless all of them are broken and they can't breathe. They can't, like, it's called flail chest. If you break like 8 or 10 of the ribs, uh, when you when your diaphragm expands to try to inhale, the the chest wall just kind of sucks in. Um, um, in that case, sometimes you have to go and you got to repair the rib fractures by putting plates on. But short of that, if you only broke a couple ribs, and there's no punctured lung, and there's no hemothorax or bleeding into the lung cavity, which is could be life-threatening. It is life-threatening. Um, if you don't have those two things, then you just let the rib fractures heal, and they heal within a couple months. Usually reattach by 1 month, and then gets strong. The bond strengthens over the next several months. So I came home and I was like, crap! I think I broke multiple ribs. I've broken a rib before on the other side from a surfing accident where my longboard speared me in the side. That took a month. It just pinpoint speared me, broke one rib, and that rib took about 4 weeks to heal up. It probably was just like a little hairline fracture. But this was different. When I moved my shoulder and when I breathed, I could feel a crunching of these broken pieces of bone rubbing against each other, and sometimes the ends would go click, click, click like that in a couple different places, and I was like, oh, okay, I definitely messed up my ribs. But I had to decide whether to go to the hospital. And I'm paying, or I was at that time, paying for Cobra, which was expensive. I wish I didn't pay for Cobra. I wish I just got a cheaper plan, which I do have now. But at the time, I was paying $1,800 out of pocket every month to maintain this health insurance coverage that I had when I was working. So I'm paying $1,800 for this good insurance, medical insurance, but there's a deductible, and I don't remember what the deductible is for that plan. I think for this plan I have now, it's like $5,000. So let's just say it was the same. I was thinking about whether to go to the hospital, and I'm like, if I go to the ER, they're going to at least CT scan my chest, get a chest x-ray and CT scan it, look for pneumothorax or hemothorax, collapsed lung, possibly look for the rib fractures, how many. But my legs were hurting too. I was pretty beat up from this fall. So they're probably going to x-ray my legs. Because I have multiple injuries, they may just do a full trauma scan, which means a CT of my head, neck, thoracic spine, lumbar spine, and CT of my abdomen to make sure I don't have any internal bleeding in my abdomen. That's a lot of radiation. So had I gone to the hospital, I would get irradiated. ER doc would see me, maybe a trauma doc. Assuming I did not have a pneumothorax or hemothorax, which means a punctured lung or bleeding into the lung cavity, they would say, okay, just take it easy, go home, take some Tylenol, and it'll get better in a month or two. But see, I already know that, being a doc, and so I was at home, and I had a pulse oximeter to put on my finger to check my oxygen. My oxygen was fine. My throat, my trachea was not deviated to one side. I wasn't having a lot of trouble breathing. I could only take shallow breaths because it hurt so much with the ribs. But I wasn't pale. I wasn't in shock from blood loss, like internal bleeding somewhere. So I thought, well, if I go to the hospital, I'm going to get all these tests done, be irradiated, and then be charged. My guess would be $3,000 or $4,000. That's an estimate. My guess. as to how many thousands of dollars it would be, maybe more. Um, and this insurance that I pay $1,800 for every month at that time, um, well, it wouldn't cover that because I'd have to pay a deductible. So I'd have to pay another $3,000, $4,000 out of my pocket for getting irradiated until something that I already knew. Now there was a risk to that, and that risk was maybe I did have a collapsed lung or bleeding into my chest cavity or somewhere else that I wasn't aware of, and I could have died. That was a risk, and that was a risk I took, which maybe wasn't a good idea, but I'm alive. I'm making this video right now. This happened last year, and I saved money from going to the ER. And I was thinking, that's really strange. I was like, if I wasn't a doctor who knew the trauma protocols for rib fractures, then I would have just gone to the ER and I would have gotten charged all this money. I've been irradiated and told to come home and take Tylenol. And that's a lot of money. On top of what I'm paying for each month as a premium. And so I was thinking, man, why are things set up this way? My friends from Canada, they don't pay this kind of money. They pay taxes, but I don't know how much they pay in taxes that supports this, but they got a system that if they have rib fractures, they can go to the hospital and they'll get taken care of, and they don't have to worry about being financially stripped. My friend in the UK, same thing. Yeah, these are not like some very different countries. These are our English-speaking cousins. UK, Canada. Canada's our northern neighbor. They both have national healthcare systems. Granted that they're not perfect, but I think they're a lot better than this system for the people. This system is really good for corporations to make a lot of money. Insurance companies, third-party payers, hospitals. This system is really good for corporations. It's not good for people. So I just feel like this way of life that we live is running up against limits, both from an energy standpoint and an infrastructure maintenance standpoint, and climate standpoint, and an economic standpoint, where we've reached this kind of this really parasitic corporate economic system that is just like sucking the money out of citizens without providing things like universal health care that other countries that are just neighboring us and speak the same language provide their citizens. So it's, yeah. So this talk is talking about, we're told that there is this unending progress, unending source of energy, and we can tech our way out of any, we can find some technological innovation out of any problem that we have, and we have the greatest society that has ever existed. And I just don't think that narrative is true. And that's why I made this talk. And those are the thoughts that have been swirling around in my head for the last couple months. well, the rib fracture one happened a year ago, so that's been swirling around in my head for a year. So, okay, now knowing that, what can I do with that information? Because you might say, well, Gooby, that's horribly depressing. Like, why did I listen to this talk? Man, now I need to go have a drink, or I need to go, like, spend some time outside with my doggy. Well, that's a good thing. Drinking's not a good thing. Well, I mean, drinking usually is not a good thing. Alcohol. Spending time outside with your doggy, that's a great thing. So I'm glad if it makes you want to do that. But yeah, what do you do with that information? It helps me not waste my time doing things that this culture tells me I should do, but that I don't really need to do. That's what it helps me. Helps me do is realize, I'm going to just enjoy being alive. And I don't need to chase status in this society. I don't need to chase fame or an immense amount of wealth. I need some money to survive and eat in this society, to keep a roof over my head. But I don't need to chase that money. I just want to be alive. Also, I'm not going to get swept up in shared illusions that hold groups of people together, whether it's politics or religion or some conspiracy theory on the internet. I'm not going to waste my time with that. Also, I'm going to do my best not to contribute to these problems. I'll also try to do my best to contribute to alleviating these problems if possible. That's hard though, because I'm just one person out of 8.2 billion people walking on this planet. So there's only so much I can do, but I'll do my best. Yeah, those are the things that it helps me do. Also, it helps pierce the illusion of what this culture tells me, because there's a lot of harmful things that this culture tells people, is mainly to control them and to make them work for the civilization. But if I see that, that stuff's not true, I don't need to do those things, then I'm freer. I'm free of those conceptions and the value system that is given to me by the culture. I don't have to accept it. I can have my own values. So it gives me freedom. Those are the reasons why I keep thinking about these things and exploring it and trying to understand myself, trying to understand being alive as a human being in 2025 on this planet. Yeah. Well, hope you have a good day or evening wherever you are, and thanks for watching this video. See you in the next video. Bye. So it's springtime, and this is really cool. You can see this is some kind of fir tree, conifer, and the new leaves come out of these bundles that look like a bouquet. Like someone wrapped some flowers or something. It's so pretty. Let's see if we can find an unopened one. Oh, here's an unopened one. Right here. But it opens up into this one that has all these leaves come out. That's so cool. Oh, here's that one that's partially open. Right there. And a real treat is these Columbine flowers. These guys are so cool. Check out, I'm trying to get it in focus. Yeah, these flowers are so cool. They hang upside down. We'll see if we can see what it looks like underneath without bothering the flower too much. That's what it looks like underneath. What a beautiful flower. Springtime is so cool. You can see a whole bunch of green. And those leaves on the big maple, those big maple leaves, they really just came out in the last couple weeks. See how big they are? They're like bigger than my hand. Bigger than my hand. And they all grew out in the last couple weeks. Here's a pink version of the Columbines. And a really pretty water drop in between the leaves. Oh, there's one on top of the flower here. So pretty.